Hey, what's happening? Tim Warner here. Let's talk about IT silos. What do I mean by that? Well, when I think of a silo, I think of a grain silo, a traditional, what you'd see on a farm, cylinder. And that's how I think of IT silos, where an IT professional is working for a business that's partitioned its IT. Not so much that the whole IT department is a silo, which could also be the case, but within that IT silo, you've got your job function. And you know something? I don't like siloed IT. I understand its purpose, especially for huge businesses, but I don't like that, and I've never enjoyed being in that situation. So I think it's important, especially if you're new or newish to IT, or if you're thinking of moving into IT as your career, to think about the kind of situation that'll make you happiest to work in. I have a good friend here in Nashville who works in IT deployment for, actually more configuration management for HCA, which is an enormous, one of the biggest healthcare conglomerates in the country, if not the world. And their IT is siloed to the point where each person and each work group is responsible for just a tiny slice of the pie. My friend supports VMware, Windows servers, and Linux servers, and some hyper-converged servers. And that's his silo, and that's his domain, he and his team. And in this particular organization, there appears to be little communication among other groups. I mean, they have service ticket software to try to keep some control to the chaos, but largely each group does their own thing and they stay in their sandbox, and other groups stay in theirs. I'm happiest myself when I'm doing industry work, when I'm supporting anywhere from under 100 to several hundred users. I like that because by definition, the IT department is going to be small enough to where each technician has a larger scope of responsibility. Basically, it comes down to I like to have my hands in multiple pies. So some things to think about are, how do you feel about that, number one? I mean, in another YouTube video, I talk about choosing an IT specialization. And frankly, if you're niche enough in your skill set, you may by definition find yourself in an IT silo because you and maybe a couple colleagues are the go-to subject matter experts or SMEs for that particular technology. And it can be nice because you feel more valuable to your organization that way and you feel more indispensable. But I would always give you the caveat to never get too comfortable feeling indispensable, because if there's one thing that I consider a truism in the IT industry is that nobody is indispensable. Everybody is expendable to their company. I mean, unless you work only for yourself. Difficult to fire yourself, as the saying goes. But I would advise very strongly and candidly against lulling yourself into a false sense of security that, oh, well, I'm the only one who knows how to do these things at this organization, therefore they can't fire me. Well, I've found in my experience that they can and will fire you if need be, and then realize after the fact that they done goofed because nobody else knows how to do a particular thing. But they'll continue to go on and eventually get around the problem and continue and do their thing. You see what I mean? So being realistic, I think, is important. So the question is, as I said, how specialized is your interest, is your skill set? What kind of team do you want to work on? How much is communication important to you? DevOps transformation is one of those cliche terms that does have meaning to it. At first, I know a lot of people in industry, because I talked to them and listened to them, felt skeptical that DevOps transformation was going to be basically a fad, a fashion statement for a while. But no, it really does have legs to it, because ultimately the concept of DevOps means you've got these different IT teams, particularly dev is development and operations is more systems, infrastructure, network. you've got these people that historically didn't have much business communicating or collaborating. I mean, other than the devs would ping the infrastructure people saying, hey, I need an environment, please. And the infrastructure people would ping the development and say, hey, you're doing this the wrong way over here. Let's tweak it, or you shouldn't be doing the other, that kind of thing. DevOps is about the active engagement and interdependence between these former silos in the name of delivering your services, whatever your products and services are that you're delivering, doing so in a way faster than ever before, safer than ever before, and more reliably than ever before. So it's legit. And I personally have experienced DevOps transformation, so I personally know what it feels like. And it definitely is awkward until everybody gets on the same page. I've seen businesses do DevOps in a more successful way and in a less successful way. The more successful way is when there's consistent buy-in across everybody, across the entire organization, and there's a commitment to follow it through and not just start down a DevOps path. Okay, let's get everybody into Azure DevOps working with the same set of tools and then kind of forget about it and move on to the next shiny object. That's not cool at all. But if there's an end-to-end commitment with follow-through, then I found the toughest part is getting everybody on the same page and getting everybody bought in to what we're doing here with DevOps. And then from there, it really becomes a natural part of daily life. And that I think is the best case scenario. So if you're thinking, Tim, what the heck are you talking about? Then I think that I'm glad that you're watching this video, because I would strongly recommend that you dive into what DevOps is and what it means. You might want to consider listening to a couple audiobooks or reading the books. If you've heard of the Phoenix Project and the names are escaping me now. Let me quickly look. Best DevOps books. There are two novels, actually. There's one book called The DevOps Handbook by Gene Kim, Genekim, the DevOps Handbook. That's more or less an instructional manual. But then Gene wrote the Unicorn Project and the Phoenix Project as novelizations that show a business going through a DevOps transformation. So if you're not yet working for teams or not yet working for a business that's adopted DevOps, I would strongly recommend you start with those books to get a good ground level feel for it, because it really is legit in terms of you've got developers with much more understanding of how the infrastructure works. You've got the infrastructure people with a much deeper understanding of how software development lifecycle works. And a good example of that is infrastructure as code. When teams are committed to DevOps, your infrastructure people now have their deployments encoded as code and committed to the same or related source code repositories that the software developers are using to build the line of business software products. So by definition, there's a cross-pollination there, and there's a union, a shared set of tools. Azure DevOps isn't the only tool set, but it's a good one because it's so unified. You've got everything under one roof, for example. And you've got, through the concept of automation pipelines, the ability to layer in checks and balances and gates and automated testing to minimize disruption when a change is made to the system. So if a developer submits or commits a bug fix, we've got a series of gates that commit goes through before you get anywhere close to the production environment that's facing your customers and other stakeholders. And so if that code commit does cause a regression problem, you capture that as early in the pipeline as possible, stop the build, notify the appropriate people so they can iterate and fix and resubmit those changes. You see what I mean? These are some of the real tangible benefits of DevOps. So if you're fortunate enough to be able to choose a little bit where you're going to work next in IT, I would have you look extra hard and ask those questions during your technical interviews about where the shop is in their DevOps transformation. Where are they in adopting this culture evolution, these shared tools, these shared processes, at like approaching their work in a methodological way, like using Agile or Scrum as a process. Because really, those processes get a bad name sometimes as being overly ritualistic and what's up with this stand-up business. But ultimately, it's a great thing, I believe, and I've lived that, because fundamentally those processes are about not letting stuff fall through the cracks, which can happen all too easily when IT service teams don't have a structured methodological method to their madness. Okay, we've reached 10 minutes. Enough preaching for me. I hope this lesson made some semblance of sense. I'll catch you on the flip. Thanks a lot.